Hey everyone, welcome to part 70 of my Pokemon game series in Unity. So in this video, we'll look at how to enable and disable objects based on the status of our quest. So here we have a story item that will block the player from going out of the scene if the player doesn't have a Pokemon. But if I go speak to the professor and get my first Pokemon, then it'll complete this quest called Meet Professor. And once the quest is completed, it'll disable the story item that was blocking us from going to the next scene. So now if I go to the next scene, you can see the story item that was blocking us is disabled. Alright, so let's look at how to implement this. Special thanks to all my Patreons for making this series possible. By becoming a Patreon, you can support me and get access to the complete project files of the series. The project files also contain some advanced features that are not covered on YouTube. So let's start the video. So to enable and disable objects based on the quest status, we should first keep track of all the quests that are started and completed by the player. Okay, so I'll create a script to keep track of all the quests. So inside scripts, in the quest folder, I'll create a new script called quest list. Okay, let me open this up. Alright, let me just get rid of the default code. So this class will contain a list of quests. Alright, so I'll create a list called quests. And let me just initialize the list from here itself. Alright, so we have a list of quests. So next, we need a function to add a quest to this list. So I'll create a public function called add quest. So this will take a quest as the parameter. And we just need to simply add it to our quest list. Alright. And by the way, we only need to add it if the list doesn't already contain the quest that we are trying to add, right? So I'll just do a simple check before we try to add. Okay. And I'll only add it if the quest list doesn't already contain the quest that we are trying to add. Okay. So next, when we start a quest or complete a quest, we should add that quest into our quest list, right? So first we need a way of getting a reference to the quest list from the quest. So how can we do that? So the quest list script will be attached to the player. So we can just create a static function that will return an instance of the quest list. So this is the same approach that we used for getting an instance of inventory and party and all. So if you look at the inventory over here, we have a static function called getInventory, and we are getting an instance to it by finding the player game object and getting the inventory from it. Okay, so let's do the same for the quest list. I'll create a static function that returns an instance of quest list, and I'll just call this get quest list. Okay, so in here, first we need to find the player game object. So I'll do that by finding the player controller script, and then I'll just use get component to get the quest list from the player game object. Okay, so now from the quest script, we can get an instance to the quest list, and then when we start the quest and complete the quest, we can add the quest to the quest list, right? So first let me do it from the start quest function. So in here, first we need to get a reference to the quest list. So we can do that by calling the get quest list function that we just created now. Okay. And next we need to add this quest to the quest list, right? So I'll say quest list dot add quest. And to add this quest, we just have to pass this keyword. All right. So this will pass the current quest. So next, let me also do the same when we complete the quest. So I'll copy these two lines and I'll paste it into the complete quest function. Okay. So now when we start or complete a quest, it'll be tracked in our quest list class. Okay. So before we test this, let me just make this class serializable so that we can see the quest in our quest list inside the inspector. Okay, so I'll just make it serializable. So now let's go to Unity and add the quest list script to the player game object. Okay. So right now we can't see anything in the script, but if we change this to debug, then you'll be able to see the quest list. Okay. So let's go ahead and test if the quests are being tracked correctly. All right. So I'll just minimize the game so that we can have a look at the inspector. So let me select the player, and the quest list doesn't show anything right now. So let me change the mode to debug. All right. So now we can see the quest list, but it doesn't have any quest right now. So let me go and speak to this NPC to start a quest. Okay. So I've started a quest, and now in the quest list, you can see the details of the quest that we started. Okay. So this is the reason why we made the quest class serializable. So yeah, the quests are being tracked correctly in our quest list. So next, we need to enable and disable objects based on the status of the quest. All right. So for that, I'll create a new script called quest object. So this will be attached to the game objects that we want to enable or disable. Okay. So let me open this up. And in the script, first we need a variable for the quest that we need to check. So I'll create a variable of quest base and I'll call this quest to check. All right. And next, we need variables to define the actions that should be done when the quest starts or completes. So in our case, we just have two actions, enable and disable. So let me create an enum to define these actions. I'll call this object actions and it can be enable or disable. And by the way, I'll make the first action something like do nothing so that by default nothing will happen. All right. So let me create a variable of type object actions and I'll call this on start, and this will be the action performed when the quest starts. So next I'll just duplicate this and create another action for on complete. So now let's go to Unity and assign the script onto a game object. So let me just open up the hometown scene. Okay. And in here, I'll create an empty object called quest object. And by the way, we can just turn the mode to normal. We don't want to see all those additional data anymore. All right. So let me just reset the position of this, and then I'll attach the quest object script to this. So what we'll do is we won't directly attach the script to the objects that we want to enable or disable. Instead, we'll create an object like this, and the object that we want to enable or disable will be a child of the quest object. So all the game objects that needs to be enabled or disabled will always be the child of the quest object that contains the script. All right. So in the case of the story item, we want to disable it when the player meets the professor and gets the first Pokemon, right? So when that quest is completed, we should disable it. So in the quest to check, I'll select the meet professor quest. All right. And we want to disable the story item when that quest is completed. So for the action of on complete, I'll select disable. Okay. So this is how quest objects will be architected. So now let's go back to the quest object script and let's write the code to perform these actions. So here I'll create a public function called update object status. Okay. So in this function, first I'll check if there is an action for on start. So for that I'll say if on start is not equal to object actions dot do nothing, it means we have some on start action, right? And then we should also check if this quest is started. So if the quest is started and if we have an action for on start, then we should perform that action. But how can we check if the quest is started? So inside quest, we have the status of the quest, but over here, we don't have a reference to the quest. We only have reference to the quest base, right? So from quest base, we won't know if the quest is started or not. So what I'll do is in the quest list class, I'll create a function called is started. Okay. And this function will take the name of the quest as the parameter. So this function will check if a quest is started or not if we pass the name of that quest. So first we need to get a reference to the quest from its name. So to do that, we can get the quest from this list with this name. So for that, I'll say quest dot first or default. So we need to import link in order to use first or default. So we want to get the first quest with this name, right? So here I'll check if name of the quest is equal to the quest name passed in the parameter. Okay, so this will give us the quest with this name. And what we actually want is the status of that quest, right? So I'll use dot status to get the status of the quest. And let me actually store this in a variable called quest status. All right. So now we have the status of the quest. So next, we just need to check if the status of the quest is equal to started. All right. So that means the quest is started. And we can also say that the quest is started if its status is completed, right? So if a quest is completed, then obviously at some point it should have started, right? So if a quest is completed, then we can also say it was started. So I'll also check if quest status equal to completed. All right. And we just have to return the value of this from this function. Okay. So next, let's create a function to check if the quest is completed. So I'll name this function is completed. And in this case, we should only return true if the quest status is equal to completed. Okay. So now let's go back to the quest object script. And now we can check if the quest has started by calling questlist.isStarted function, right? So first, let me cache a reference to the quest list from the start function. So I'll just use questlist.get questlist function to get an instance. All right. And now to check if the quest has started, we can use questlist.isStarted function and simply pass the name of the quest that we want to check. Okay. So if we have an onStart action and if the quest to check is actually started, then we should perform the onStart action, right? We need to perform the onStart action on all the children of the quest object. So I'll use a for each loop to loop through all the children of this object. So inside this loop, we can enable or disable the child based on the value of onStart. All right. So if onStart is equal to enable, then we can enable the child by calling child.gameObject.setActive true. And otherwise, if onStart is equal to objectActions.disable, then we can disable the child by calling setActive false. All right. So next, we can also execute the onComplete action just like this. So if we have an onComplete action, so if onComplete is not equal to do nothing, and if the quest to check is completed, then we can run the onComplete action on the children, right? So let me just copy this for each loop and paste it over here. And in here, we need to check for the onComplete action instead of the onStart action, right? So if there is an onComplete action and if the quest is completed, then we'll run the action on all the children of this object. Okay. So next, let's call the update object status function from start. Okay. So when a scene loads, we'll enable or disable the quest object based on the quest status. All right. But we should also call this function if some quest status changes in the current scene, right? So if something inside the quest list changes, then we can invoke an event that will notify all the quest objects in the scene. So in the quest list, I'll create an event called onUpdated. Okay. So in order to use action, we have to import the system namespace. So we have an event and we should invoke it when something changes in the quest list, right? So right now, this is the only function that is modifying the quest list. So we can invoke the event from here. All right, I'll just call onUpdated dot invoke. So the addQuest function is called when a quest is started and when a quest is completed. So whenever we start or complete a quest, this event will be invoked. Okay. So next, let's make the quest object subscribe to this event. So in the start, I'll subscribe to questlist.onUpdated event, and when this event is fired, we should call the update object status function, right? So let me attach it to this event. Okay. And let's also unsubscribe from this event from the onDestroy function. Okay. So if this object is destroyed for some reason, then we'll unsubscribe from the event and this function will no longer be called. So that's all we need to do. So let's go to Unity and test this. So we have already filled all the details for the quest object. So we want to disable the story item when Meet Professor quest is completed. So let's test if that is working correctly. So I'll go to the gameplay scene and run the game. Okay, so if I try to go out of the town without completing the quest, then I'll be blocked by the story item. So let me go ahead and complete the quest. All right. So here I'll get my first Pokemon and it will also complete Meet Professor quest. So now the story item should be disabled. So let's try going out of the town. All right. So you can see that the story item was disabled and I can go to the next town. So the quest objects are working correctly. The story item is getting disabled when this quest is completed. All right. So we have tested the onComplete action now. So let's also test the onStart action. So right now, the revive over here is active by default, right? So let's say we only want to activate it once we start the Fainted Pokemon quest. So to do that, we can put the pickup under a quest object like this. So let me actually turn this quest object into a prefab. So here I'll create a new folder called quests. And I'll drag and drop the quest object here to turn it into a prefab. All right. And by default, we don't want any children for the quest object prefab, right? It's going to be different for different quest. But if I delete this now, it'll also delete the story item from here. So first, let me make a copy of the story item so that we'll have a copy when it gets deleted from the prefab. So let me paste it over here. Okay. So now we can delete the story item from the prefab. All right. And in the prefab, let's actually clear everything. So we don't want any quest by default. Okay. So now I'll name this quest object as Meet Professor quest object, since we are going to have more than one quest object in the scene. Okay. And once again, we'll have to assign everything since we deleted it from the prefab. So let me choose Meet Professor for the quest. And we want to disable it when the quest is completed. And finally, we just have to make the story item a child of this prefab. All right. So yeah, if you don't create prefabs earlier on, then you'll have to reassign everything like this. So next, let's use the prefab to create another quest object. So I'll call this one Fainted Pokemon quest object. All right. So this pickup is the object that we want to enable for this quest, right? So I'll make the pickup a child of this quest object, and we want this pickup to be disabled by default, and we want to enable it when the quest starts. So here the quest to check is fainted Pokemon, and on start we should enable it. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this. All right, so yeah, you can see the revive is not active by default, but if I go speak to this NPC and start the quest, then it should be enabled. All right, so you can see it's enabled now. That was actually a bug in the animation. I'll fix that in the future. But yeah, the quest objects are working correctly. So before we stop the video, there is one small issue that I want to fix. So let me show you the issue first. I'll open the gameplay scene. All right. So right now, even though we have a story item over here, it won't actually block the player from going to the next town. All right. So I can simply close the dialog of the story item and go to the next town. Right. So there is nothing blocking the player. So we can solve this by keeping an invisible object over here that blocks the player. Okay. So here, along with the story item, we can place another object on top to block the player. So let me just duplicate the story item and I'll call this something like blocker. Okay. So I'll actually give this some icon so that we can see it in the scene. So this object doesn't need the story item script. So let me just remove that. And then we want to place this on top of the story item. So I'll just add 1 to the Y position of the story item. Okay. And finally, I'll change its layer to solid objects so that it'll block the player. So that's all we have to do. And by the way, let me also add an icon for the story item so that we can see where it's placed. So yeah, let's test this now. Okay. So even after I close the dialog for the story item, I won't be able to go to the style since we have our blocker object over there. All right. And if we complete the quest, the blocker will also be disabled since it's a child of our quest object. Okay, so we can actually go ahead and test that. So let me go complete the quest. All right, so the quest is completed, and now both the story item and the blocker should be disabled. Okay, so yeah, you can see I can go to the next town. So that's working fine. So I'll stop the video here. If you think this video is helpful, please leave a like and consider subscribing to my channel. That will really help me out. So I'll see you in the next video.